Hi, everybody. Sorry for the delay. We had a little bit of technical difficulties, but welcome to your virtual class. And I'm excited to be teaching it today. And hopefully for the next several classes, I'll be your teacher. I'm remote from Ecstasy Crafts, hence the little bit of difficulties we had getting my cameras to work, but they were working just a few minutes ago. So hopefully they'll continue to work. So we're going to get started. I'm going to switch to my overhead camera so that you can see some of the examples. And then we'll start to make the two cards that we have on schedule today. So I'm just going to switch to my overhead camera, and hopefully that will go well. All right, looks good. Okay. So you saw the cards that were advertised, and I think we're going to make this one second, but I thought I would show it to you first so you have an idea of what it looks like. It's a little blurry to me, but so I did add a belly band to the card. You didn't see that in the photos, but we're going to add that because this collection seems to lend itself towards wedding cards. So I'm just going to slip that off. And then on the inside, you can see I did add an invitation piece. This side, you can either put a card or a gift card in it. So it's a gatefold. You can actually fold it two ways, either this way or the way I intended for it to go. So that's the second card that we're going to make. And then the first card is actually this card, which is a wedding card or could be a Mother's Day card or any other event that you want it to be for. So it uses the same color scheme as the other card. This features a little tool shaker part because you did get sequins in your pack. And then we cut out this little piece, and what I did was I added it to the inside of the card as a decoration, and you can put that wherever you want it to be. I just put it in the bottom right corner. So this card we're going to make first. Now, I understand everybody received the instructions, so we'll go through that. But before we begin, I just want to show you the few things that you should have received with your kit, or that you would need to follow along with this to make these cards. So this is the Belle Fleur 6x6 paper pack. So as you flip through it, they are double-sided sheets of paper, and there's a variety of designs. And so I've chosen a couple that we're going to use today, and then a couple that we're going to use in the next class that's currently scheduled for March 3rd. So you can see it's lovely paper. And then in your card kit, in the kit, you also receive the stamp set that goes with the Belle Fleur. So these are stamps that match the different papers. And just to let you know, there are on the inside of the cover, you can look at the inside and the back, inside of the back cover, and both offer examples of how you might choose to shade your design. I think that's always helpful when you have stamps and you want to create a similar color scheme for the flowers. So you get the stamp set, and we're going to use that in the Gatefold Card. And then you should have received the Enamel Dots, and there are a variety of colors that coordinate with the package. We're going to use mainly the white ones today, but we're going to use some of the darker ones in the next class. And then the other item that you would have received in your kit is the Wispy Fronds from Creative Expressions. I think this is my new favorite die set because they're great. These little fronds, you can just add anything. And they have lovely details, the little dots. If you've cut some out, you'll see that, and they cut really nicely as well. So that's what came in your kit, or you will need definitely to make these cards. And then the other item, and we didn't include this in the kit because most people have a set of nested hearts. This is Nellie's Nested Hearts. And we're not going to use the larger ones. We're going to use the 5 smaller ones. So from the inside out, and I'm just going to take all of these out. And then there was another option that was listed on the website as well. One of the slimline dies has some nested hearts. So if you have your own set, go ahead and use your own set. If you want to make it a different shape, you can also make it a different shape. But we thought with the wedding theme, the hearts was a good idea. So I'm just going to move this out of the way. And then just before we begin, I'm going to show you a couple other items that are available in the Belle Fleur collection in case you were interested in these other items. So there is a, this is a rub-on transfer sheet. I think I have it upside down. So again, it's very easy, just with a little popsicle stick, you put it on your paper and it transfers the image to your card. There are 2 sheets in the pack with some sentiments and some flowers. So it's the same sheet on the other side. I just used some of the sentiments. The other item is some lace. And again, the lace is, or ribbons. It says worth the wait, whole heart. You have my whole heart. This is sort of another, just a real lacy pattern. And then another pattern that sort of matches one of the patterns in the paper pack. And then the last item on the with the collection is the 12 by 12 paper pack. So, or paper pad. This comes with 40 double-sided sheets. It's 200-gram square paper. And they're the same designs as in the small, except that they are larger in size. So it is scaled to the larger paper pack. I'll just show you the two side by side. So you do see one has larger designs than the other. It's not just the same paper in a larger size. It's actually the designs are scaled up. Otherwise, it's exactly the same number of designs and the same double-sided feature. So you can see that. All right, so let's get started. And hopefully everyone has had a chance to look through the instructions and maybe done some prep work. Now, I don't know, is it usual that you've prepared for the class? We're going to go through it nice and slow, that if you haven't, then you can just go ahead and do that as we go. But sometimes having it, a few things prepared ahead is always helpful. So I have prepared a few things so that I can be responsive to the chat if I need to be, but we'll get started. So I have my instructions here, and we're going to do this wedding card first. So first of all, what you do need is you need to create, it is a 5 by 7 card. So you need to create a 5 by 7 card. I usually cut using a big guillotine, a piece of paper that is 7, because I use 8.5 by 11 paper, 7, and then I turn it over and I make it 10. So if people want to go ahead and cut that, and then at the same time, we're going to cut another piece in the same color cardstock, and this is 6.5 lengthwise by 4.25. And that piece is going to be our front piece, and that's how we're going to cut into that to make our shaker, and then we're going to attach it to our big card. And then the other item you need to cut is a strip of paper. I have green color cardstock. I'm not sure what colors people have chosen for this card design, but the green sort of matches the theme of the paper. This is a light green paper. And so this is 7 inches by, I believe it's 3/4 inches. Yes, and we're going to emboss that. So we'll do that in a minute. So you need to cut these 2 pieces, and then, and usually I use a paper trimmer or a guillotine for those. And then we're going to die cut the hearts once we get that far. So I'll give you a few minutes to do that. And then hopefully people also were able to find a piece of tulle in their stash. Otherwise, you could use acetate. So I know the traditional way to make a shaker card is with acetate, but I think tulle just lends itself to a wedding card. And it's to me, it's a little bit easier to create that, the shaker card. All right, so I've got my, now for the pattern, I chose this piece of paper, as you can see in the design. So it has some roses and other flowers. And the other side is this one. But again, you could choose any of the paper designs that you wanted for your card. It really doesn't matter. It's just the one that I chose. So what we're going to do is actually, maybe you want to cut this, so we can cut this size. And although this is a 5x7 card and we use a 6x6 piece of paper, you can see how you can adapt it to the different size cards. So this piece is of the pattern paper. I have in the example, or in the instructions, is 6 inches, because that's the width, by 3.5. So just cut a 3.5 inch strip, and that's really all we need for this card, just the 3.5 inch strip. So I have a little guillotine that I like to use because my knives never get dull, and I tend to get it straighter. So I have that piece ready to go as well. So once you have your card stock, then we do need to score the to create the 5x7 card. So we need to use a scoreboard and score at 5 inches. I tend to like to use the stylus when I score. I think it gives me a little bit better impression or indentation into the paper, and sometimes I do it a few times, and that just allows it, when I fold it over, that it has a better fold. I use very thick cardstock, so this is actually 120-pound cardstock that I use. So I have my card, and I do have a bone folder that I often will just make a nice crease with for the paper. Now, sometimes you'll get a little bit of a fray there. And what I like to use is just a piece of very fine sandpaper, and I just sand that off a little bit so it doesn't look like there's a frayed edge. So now it's a nice clean edge. So that's a little tip for you. So we have our paper. I've got this that I'm going to later attach here. And so now what I need to do is, well, I guess it's all right. I think I cut it a little bit narrower, or this paper maybe is too. But what we're going to do now is let's emboss first. Well, no, let's cut out the hearts. So I'm not sure if everyone has cut out their hearts yet, but you need hearts. You need 2 of this size. Now this size is approximately, I've got my, oh, you can't see it, but I've got some measurements there. So it's about 2¼ inch wide. So that's a 2¼ inch wide heart, or whatever size you have. That's the largest heart we're going to use. And again, you can see that although the die is larger, the inside heart is smaller. And then we're going to, so we need 2 of these from white cardstock. We need 1 of the next size smaller from white cardstock. And then we need 1 of these from green cardstock, because that's going to go on the inside of the window here. We need to create a frame by attaching these 2 dies. And then we're going to add, we need a small white one. So a green, and this one, oh, this one we don't need. That's for the other card. So 2 this size, a white frame like this, a green one like this, and a green one like this, and a white one. So if everybody wants to go ahead and cut those, then we can go ahead and emboss. Now I know you're going to need to do a couple runs through your machine because usually we only have one of these size dies. And then, so you need to do it twice. And then in order to make the frame, what I usually do is I'm just going to turn this upside down so that I can tape it, is that I actually use a little piece of low tack tape. You can see I've got little remnants of tape on this to hold it together. And that just holds it together while I run it through my die cutting machine, which I can do right now. While you're doing it, I'm going to do the frame. And then usually I have a fairly wide and longer plate that goes through the machine I use. So I can put a whole bunch of things on this and cut it through at once. So that just saves you some time, that you can cut all the different sizes, size of hearts, and then we will put them together. So I'm going to run this through my die cutting machine. And I have a little press boy on my table here, but otherwise I often use my usual machine as a press boss, so one of the bigger ones available at Accessy Crafts. Just gonna run it through. All right. So there's my heart. Actually, I could use this as my layered heart here. Originally in my design, I did do 2 of the frames, but then I wanted to fill it in. I didn't like just the 2 frames, so I filled it in. So you can just use this as your second layer. And then we do need a green one from the smaller layer. So the inside of the frame here, just take that out and then cut a green one, and then one other big one, and then the small one. So if people have that completed, then they can go on to the next step. And what we're going to do is emboss. So we're going to emboss the strip that goes down the card here, and we're going to emboss 2 of the hearts. I like to add texture to my designs to create more interest. And so I have it's a 5x5 embossing folder. It's been well loved. And you can see that it's not going to do the whole piece at once. But what I can do is I can line it up in here just so that it looks straight, because you kind of want to make sure that the polka dots are together. And then I can also add to my embossing folder my little hearts. So I can do it all together. And then I can run it through my die cutting machine. Now, in order to avoid getting a little line here, because sometimes when you run it through and it creates a little line where it left off. So in order to not get that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to place my embossing folder just at the edge, so that the end just is at the edge where it's no longer going to be attached or in contact with the die cutting plate. So this one has a little bit of a graded edge, so I'm just going to do that because I have to run a second one through anyway to finish off the embossing, and that will just avoid getting that line. So I'm going to run this through, and I just have to adjust my little machine here. Hopefully people can, and I just kind of hold it as I run it through my machine to keep it in that space. All right. So now I've avoided, you can see there's no little line there, but now what I have to do is put it back through, line it up, and I've got my hearts embossed. And so what I like to do is you can see through, and I like to put it a distance here that's going to keep it snug in place, right? And part of you repeat the pattern, and then it just avoids slipping away. So I'm going to do the same thing. This is going to be at the edge, and I'm just going to, actually, I don't really have to do that. All I have to do is emboss this part of it, so I can just run it through my machine, and then I know I don't have to go all the way through, and then I'll just reverse. That's the other way you can do it. Often you just need, when you're doing this, you just need an inch or so that didn't get embossed, right? Because we're not usually making very large cards. So just doing a little bit and reversing is often the easiest. Okay, so we have that strip now embossed. Now, I chose polka dots, but you could choose any pattern of an embossing folder that you like, but a repeating design works the best because you don't want it to be too distracting. So now we have our hearts, we have this piece, and we're ready to, and we have our hearts cut. The only thing that we haven't cut yet are the fronds, so maybe we're doing that at the same time. I do have mine cut here. You need 2 of the bigger ones, or the wider ones, I call them wider, and 1 of the thinner ones. And the thin one we're going to put on the inside card here, and the 2 wider ones we're going to put here on each side. But of course, you could change it up, and you could put 1 of the wider and 1 of the thinner. It doesn't really matter, whatever design you kind of like. I just like the symmetry. So if you haven't cut those, go ahead and cut those, and then we're going to put it together. I'm just going to move some of my things out of the way. Okay, so I'm going to move my things to the front up here. And so the first item we're going to add really is the strip of paper to the one side of the 5x7 card. I'm going to use double-sided tape, but you could use a tape runner if that was what you prefer. That's certainly faster, or even glue if that's your preferred method of adhering things to your cards. And so this should fit. I just put 2 strips, that's enough. This is the thinnest Be Creative tape, it's 3 millimeters. I tend to use 3, 5, and the other one I like is 9. But 3 and 5 are my go-to sizes for the Be Creative tape. All right, so I'm just going to place it in a little bit from the edge, try and make it straight here. And you can see I just overlapped a little bit. That's perfect. I can just take some scissors and I can trim it. Now, I usually like to trim from the back. You just get a better cut. So we have that. And now what we're going to do is add the pattern paper to the card that we cut. So again, using double-sided tape, it looks like something didn't get cut exactly right. So now before I do it, I'm going to trim my white piece a little bit. I usually like about a 1/4 inch mat, which is kind of nice. So, okay, that looks better. And now again, I'm just going to add this using double-sided tape. The thin double-sided tape is probably fine. Again, it's not a very heavy piece of paper. If it's a heavier piece of paper or it has a little bit of a curve, or say, you know, it was wet or something, then I tend to use a little bit thicker, so it helps it adhere more of it to the card. But this is nice and flat. And we're just going to add that. Now I usually go around the edges and put one little piece in the center. Again, peel back your the protective part of the tape, and then you can add to your card. Now, sometimes what I like to do is just do part of it. I fold it over, and that allows me to make sure I have it placed correctly before I remove the rest of the tape or the protective layer. So I'm going to do those two. The one in the center, you have to definitely put that one down or take that piece off. And now I have two pieces here. What I can do is now I can hold it at where those kind of join the card. And I'm just going to add it. Once I'm happy with the placement, then I can remove it. Now I remove it straight up because otherwise sometimes the tape comes out on the side. And now this one's just downward, and now it's adhered where I want it. If you do that, then it doesn't always grab so quickly to the cardstock that I mean, I'm sure we've all had it, that you don't get it where you want it, but you rip the paper by taking it off again. So, all right, so we have this piece. And so this piece, we're going to adhere to the card, but we're not going to do that yet. What we want to do first is we want to cut out through both pieces, the pattern paper and the cardstock. We want to cut out our window. So choose a location that you want for your shaker window. And that's probably pretty good because you've got, so it's going to have this around it. And then you can see you're going to add the other heart on top. So that's placed, you know, similar to the way I did the sample here. And it also is nice. On my example, I have the little rose here. So it cuts the rose out nicely to add to the inside. So I'm going to center that rose. And again, you're using, so although we made this frame, you want to cut the inner, the smaller heart you use for the frame, which is this one. So this was the outer piece. Oops. And I'm going to use the inner one because we're going to attach the frame to the outside and we need something to attach it to. So what I like to do is, again, get it spaced where you want it to be, and then add a small piece of low tack tape to hold it in place. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the tape so that it adheres to the inside, because if I don't want it to tear my paper, and if it tears the paper, it's a piece I wasn't necessarily going to use anyway. So now I'm going to die cut this. And so we're going to die cut it through both layers. Just adjusting my machine here. And again, usually when there's a simple design like that, it's not difficult to cut through. It's more if it's intricate, when you add more layers, that it becomes more of a challenge. But, okay, so now they want and it didn't actually cut through. So I'm going to have to line it up again and make it a little deeper. This isn't my usual machine to know the settings, so it's just one that sits on my table easier. I could have just taken the one piece out as well, but it helps me line it up. All right, so let's see. Yeah, there we go. So now I have a window on my card. I have these little pieces. I'm going to gently peel off this low tack tape. And there, I didn't ruin anything. I often keep these little pieces on my machine, so I always know where there's a little piece. And so what you can do is, while we have this here, is you can just glue it together or tape it together while we have it, because then it's ready for the inside. Oh, there must have been a little piece there. It's really attached. Okay, I'm just going to use glue for the rest of this, and just a little shade of glue. Okay. So that's my decoration for the inside. It's ready to go when we're going to do that. So now we have our pattern paper on top of our white cardstock with a window in it. That's going to become our shaker window. Now what you're going to do is you're going to place it on your card in the location that you want it to be. And what we're going to do, you're not going to attach it yet, is you're going to take the heart. Now I made this green because I preferred the green to the white. You could have left it white, I suppose, but it just sort of coordinates better with the card. So once you have it in the correct space, your white with pattern piece, then you can add some tape to this and then just put it through the window and it will attach to where you want it to be. So I'm just going to add a few little pieces of double-sided tape here, because again, it's going to be behind our shaker tool. Okay. So I'm going to peel off my protective layers on my tape. I'm going to reposition this because it shifted slightly while I was doing that. And then I can just put it through the window and it will be attached to my card where I want it to be. All right, now we're going to make the shaker part of the card. And so in order to do that, you need your piece of tool, and your tool, this is my tool. I'm going to trim it, but I kind of have it on a big roll. And so I need it to fit across the opening of the heart, and I need to make sure that it's going to be up and down as well. So I'm just going to trim that a little bit because you don't really need any excess. It's easier to work with when it's smaller. Okay, and so what I'm going to do is and this has to be folded, right? So we're going to leave the folded piece at the base of the tool. But before we do that, I'm going to set that aside, is I'm going to line my heart with double-sided tape. So I'm just going to put some pieces of double-sided tape around my heart. And this will just keep the sequins inside, of course. And so it does need, you need to make sure that it doesn't have any little openings on the side, right? Because on the bottom, it's the fold, it's not coming down the bottom. And you're going to put one across the top as well, but we're not going to do that one just yet. So it doesn't look pretty, but it doesn't really have to look pretty. It's on the back. So I'm just going to take all of the pieces, except this top one, off, like the protective pieces from the tape. And now, so if people have that done, what we're going to do is we're going to add the piece of tool so that the one edge here is at the top. Okay, and I kind of have my little fold so I know, and I'm going to adhere that to this tape. Okay, so we don't have it folded yet because we're going to now add more tape on top of the tool in exactly the same place as we put it before. Okay, and this is going to allow the second layer to adhere. So just do it exactly the same again. And again, we haven't attached, well, actually, you know what? We could attach this. We could take the top. Sorry, it's the second part that you don't want to take the top off. But this one is the back of it, so we can adhere that down. And then put another one on top. And this is the one we don't want to take off just yet, because we need a space to add our sequins. Oh, you got the sequins. I didn't tell you that in your package too. It's the ones we're going to use. All right, so now you're going to just leave the top protective piece from the tape, leave that attached, and then remove all the others. And I did use a little bit thicker tape. So this is my 5mm tape that I use, because I want to make sure that the sequins aren't going to come out of my little pocket. Because really that's what we're making, a little pocket. All right, so I have that now. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold up from the bottom. You can see the fold there at the bottom, and make sure all my edges are covered. And I'm going to press it down. So that's going to make my little pocket. And you can see it's tight. It's not going to come out. And now, because I have this little opening at the top, I'm going to add my sequins. You can take it off a little bit if it's a narrow opening. And then we're just going to add some sequins. Now I have my sequin pack here. Now, if you were particular, you could say, I'm just going to add white and green. There's white, green, there's some iridescent clear, there's some brown, whatever you prefer. I'm just going to take a little spoonful and add it to my pocket. And you don't need too many, because it's not a big pocket and there's not going to be a lot of movement. And then the fewer in there, then the more movement there'll be. So I'm just gonna grab a few in here. Okay, probably could have left a little bit bigger opening. So it's in here, it's sticking a little bit to the tape on the outside edge. Just gonna put these away. Otherwise I have sequins all over my house. And this is where a pair of tweezers is very handy. I always have tweezers handy. And this lends itself to any shape if you want to make a tool shaker instead of a acetate shaker. Okay, so once I'm happy with that, got a few stuck here. I'm going to remove my piece of tape that I haven't removed yet, or the backing of it. And then I'm going to close the pocket. So just rub it down. And now you may wish to add one more piece of tape to this top opening, but just leave it like that. You don't have to remove the backing layer, because it's not adhering to anything. It's just trying to keep that pocket closed. So now I'm just going to turn it over. And we have our little tool shaker. If you leave a little bit more, I did it quite tight. If you leave a little more give in the tool, so not quite as tight, then you'll have a little more movement. But there's some movement there. You can always replace or take it down again and then redo it if you want a little more movement of the sequence. But that's basically the tool shaker. So and you can make larger ones or smaller ones. So it's kind of fun. So the next thing we need to do is we're going to take our frame and we're going to attach it around here. So of course it's going to fit exactly. And we're going to use sticky sticks. the simplest, and they adhere really well. So again, lift up your protective layer, place your design, and then lift it off. Again, I like my tweezers. And then I start usually at the bottom, make sure it all is matching, and then rub it down. Then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to place over top of this heart, the other heart. And so you can choose double-sided tape, you can choose sticky specs, whatever you want. I'm going to use double-sided tape. And it does overlap a little bit. And again, you don't need to use too much tape. Peel off the backing layers. And then you can just put it on top, wherever you desire. So I kind of have it overlapping here. And I'm gonna press it down. Now we're gonna layer up. So I had originally done a frame. You can kind of see that here, but you don't really need to do 2 frames. It's kind of extra work. And then just add this one on top. And I like dimension to my cards. So I'm going to use a little bit of a few foam tabs. And I'm going to add my green layer. And then I'm going to add my small heart on top. So you can go ahead and do that. I think these are about 1.5 millimeter foam tabs, but whatever size you have available is great. You don't need too many. It's a strong piece of card. It's not going to bend. So I'm just going to do a few here. And so the more layers you have, you probably want a little bit thinner of the foam tab so that it doesn't create too thick of a design. And they come in 1.5 to, I think there's 3, and even 0.5 millimeter, which is great. I like those to add little die cuts to designs. You don't have to get tiny little pieces of tape, and it works well. Okay, so I'm going to add this one. And then, of course, my final one is a tiny little heart. And we're going to add that on top. Now, you could add your fronds. So the way I did it here in the example is I just the little curly parts of each end, I just had that on the white part of the card so that it just overlapped. So again, we can use the sticky specs. I'm going to use 2 of the same size and in the same orientation. So again, just so that they cover the corners. And I'm going to use sticky specs. So it's great to use the sticky specs for these type of designs. And these are fairly strong. They're like, although they look very delicate, the paper itself isn't that delicate, so they're pretty good. If you're using a very intricate design on your sticky specs, you want to use one that's been used a little bit before, not a brand new one, because it's easier to pull off. Okay, so I'm just attaching that here. And I'm just going to grab my second one. Often if I'm adding things on using my sticky specs, I'll put everything I need to add at once onto the sheet, and then they're all ready to go when I want to move to that next item. So, okay, so we have that now. All we have to do is add it to the front of the card, and then we can add a few pulls. So I usually like to add some dimension. So you can use foam tape, you can use foam strips, you can use extra pieces of paper. So if you have some cardstock strips that you don't really know what to do with, I've got a few here. You can just add them. My sequins are sticking to me. You can just glue them together or run a piece of tape, and then you can use this as your dimension. We need a little dimension to allow the for the tool shaker. So you can choose however you want to add your piece. I'm going to use some, maybe I'll use the strips since they're pretty handy here. So I'm just going to add a couple strips. Again, you don't have to add too many. We could have done this. We could have added it before we added the dimension to the heart, but it doesn't really matter. Okay, I'm going to use a little bit here. Again, this is going to keep it open, and I'm going to add a little bit here. And I'm just, I mean, we don't really have anything in this space, but I'm going to add a little bit because you don't want it to be to cave in. Okay. So that's pretty good. Now I'm going to add it to my card. And again, I have my opening here that's going to fit right over my green heart. So that gives you an idea of where it's going to be placed. So you don't have to guess. And then again, I'm going to use my same little technique where I'm not going to peel off all of my protective paper on a couple areas. The inner ones, again, you kind of have to, but I usually like the sides. That's kind of the ones I like to keep only partially, have the paper partially removed. And this is the time when I would add any little extra bits I had, use them up to fill in those areas. Okay, so I'm going to put it right over my heart. And it's pretty forgiving because it's, and then I'm going to remove this extra bits of paper. If you didn't get it all, I think I did. Sometimes I can go in with a needle tool and get the paper, the remaining paper off as it rips as you were taking it away. All right, so we kind of have the card ready. We're just going to add the enamel dots to the corners and then the heart. Now I have to find my enamel dots. Oh, here we go. So I chose white with this color scheme. Again, you can choose whatever color you desire, depending on which paper pattern you chose. And I'm just going to add a little bit of glue. I always, although these are self-adhesive dots, I always add a little bit of glue. I don't want it to come off. And I'm using the Creative Expressions or Cosmic Shimmer, sorry, acrylic glue. And I have this little tip. These are the thin line tips, and they can screw right onto the Creative Expressions bottles. And then you have a little bit finer tip. I like not having so much glue coming out. I tend to use a craft knife, a dull craft knife, to just pick up my enamel dots. It kind of sticks on my little blade there. And then I can just place it over where I want it to be and press my finger down. Should be in the right spot. Sometimes it moves if you have a lot of glue on there, but you can move it around. And then I'm going to put that one on the center there. And finally, we're going to add one to this corner. All right. So that's the front of the card. And the only other piece that you could do, so you did cut that extra frond, the thin frond. I thought that worked the best. And then place it just behind the heart. And then you can place this combination on the inside of the card, wherever you want. Sometimes if you add a sentiment, maybe you want it just below the sentiment or something, or maybe you just want it in the corner, or maybe you want it in the center at the top and then add a sentiment underneath. It doesn't really matter. It's whatever your choice is. So just I'm just going to add a little bit of glue to the center of this frond, because when sometimes my glue gets. Sometimes I find when it's dry in the house, my glue was working fine anyway. So anyway, I can also add some sticky specks if that's going to work better. Or I can add a piece of tape, doesn't really matter. And then add a couple of the foam tabs. I'm just going to do it on the sticky specks in the center there. And then I can add a couple foam tabs to the back and place it in my card in the desired position, or you can just wait and decide where you're going to add it later. Doesn't matter. All right. I'm just going to put it in the same spot as I did previously, so in the lower right corner. And then the card is finished. So that's the shaker tool shaker wedding card. All right. So hopefully everybody is happy with their finished design. And if you're a little bit behind, certainly it's not that difficult to complete, and the instructions are all available. So that's the wedding card, and well, the wedding card. And then we have the gatefold card, which is also a wedding theme, but that's what we're going to.
Can I just interrupt just for a moment here? I apologize. Hi, everyone. My name's Corey. So we normally do a draw for this, and I forgot to mention to you, Mary Lynn. So, but we've done the draw, and I would just like to announce the winner. So if the winner is Cindy Keene. Cindy, congratulations. You won a $10 gift card for our online website. If you could just do a direct message to me with your email address, I would really, really appreciate it, just to make sure we get that to you as soon as possible. And that's it. Sorry for interrupting you there, Mary Lynn. Have fun, everybody, and I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, great. Well, congratulations, Cindy, on your $10 gift card. That's great. I wasn't aware that that happens in the class, so now I know, so it's a good thing. All right, so I'm just trying to clean up my sequins here a little bit, and then we're going to move on to the gatefold card. So if you don't have your instructions out, hopefully you can grab those, and then we're going to make the next card. So hopefully, how are we doing for time? I know we started late. I had camera issues, but we got those sorted. Okay. So that's the card. You can see, look the same. Okay. So now we're going to move on to the gatefold card. I'm going to grab my items I need. So I have some of my items cut out, but I'm going to still walk through it with you. And then we're going to do the stamping at the end. So in this example, so we have the belly band. I removed the belly band. I stamped, I'm going to take this out because this was to show you how you could use this portion of a card. This little area can serve to hold a card that might have information about the party. This is kind of an invitation, but it doesn't have to be an invitation. So I think what I'm going to do on today's card is I'm going to stamp, and we're going to do the stamping at the end, onto a piece of card that I can then put into this area. You can also, like in the example here, I stamped on the card itself, and I would do that first. So if I was going to stamp, because if I made a mistake with the stamp, I don't want to make the mistake after I finish the whole card and then have an error that I wasn't happy with. So I think for today's card, we're going to do that at the end, and then we can stamp the belly band too. But just know, whichever you prefer, But even if you stamped here and then had a card with the same design and stamped it, it's very nice because when you take it away, it's still a decoration on the card. The other way you could use this card is for a gift card. So this is just a gift card that I have for chapters, but it could be any store for the recipient of the card, whether it's a wedding gift card or an anniversary gift card or a shower card or whatever. So that's the purpose of this little piece here. And then it's a 5x5 gatefold card. And so there's a 5x5 opening in the center that you can put the details of the event if it works as an invitation for you. Otherwise, you might want to, if you're using it as a card to give to somebody with a gift card, then you can put a poem or some sentiment or whatever else in there or decorate it as you wish. In this example, I put a couple little sequins here with a couple little pearls. Well, these didn't come in your kit, but I had a smaller size pearl, and I just added that just to kind of decorate the center. I added little corners that you could use from the pattern paper. So again, you can decorate it as you wish. If you have less information, I was hoping I could have put one of the fronds in the middle here. So again, lots of options to decorate it. So in this gatefold card, I chose to offset it. So I didn't have the gatefold come in the center, but I overlapped it and off center, but it's whatever you choose. And then, as I said, when we started the class, you can actually fold it either way. So whatever you prefer. That was serendipity. I didn't plan it that way, but it worked out. I thought, oh, I could fold it either way. And it covers both of the whatever's on the front. It covers what's behind it. So that's your choice. So to get started with this card, what we're going to do is you need to cut a piece of paper 5 by 11, because I overlapped it, right? So it's 5 in the center, but we overlapped it. So that makes it simple. Just cut an 8.5 by 11 sheet, 5 inches. So again, you can use your paper trimmer or guillotine, whatever you prefer. I have my piece cut, and I'll give you a couple minutes to do that. You also need to cut a piece of paper that's, and I'm pretty sure this is an inch by 11 inches. Yeah, it's just over an inch. The reason it's just over an inch, like an inch and 5/8, is because I wanted to have a pattern of the polka dots that straddle this stamped piece that we put on the belly band. So that's why it's just slightly more than an inch. If you have a different pattern, it doesn't really matter, okay? And so we're going to emboss that kind of in the center because I didn't have it on the back, but you could do all of it if you wanted. I just left the embossing on the front. So you need the just over an inch piece, 11 inches long as well. And then I cut a card that I'm going to stamp on for the inside piece. And this is 4 inches by 3 3/4. So 3 3/4 this way, 4 inches long, or you can choose to stamp on the inside of the card, as I did in this example. So, and then you need a small piece, and this is 4 3/4 by, I believe it's 3/4 of an inch. Yeah, 3/4 of an inch. And that's going to form, or we're going to stamp this for the belly band. Okay. So I'll let, if people haven't gotten that together, and then you need to choose your piece of pattern paper that you wanted from the pattern pack. I chose this design, but again, you could choose any of the designs. You could choose the one on the opposite side, whatever you prefer, doesn't matter. The color schemes are very similar. As you can see, it would also look very pretty on this particular design. So again, choose a piece of pattern paper that you would like. And then we are going to have to cut some of the fronds as well, if you want to go ahead and do that. And you need the second smallest heart from green paper and one of the smallest hearts from white paper. I didn't put a big heart. You could choose from the hearts in the nested set or whatever ones you happen to have that you're using today. You could choose bigger. It doesn't matter. You could choose to put this somewhere else. It doesn't matter. It's your, whatever you prefer. This one, I just was able to put it, the belly band just fits underneath it. So that was my thought, but again, whatever works for you. So I'm going to score my gatefold. And again, it's overlapping. I'm going to score it at from one edge at 4 inches, and the other it's 2. So I'm going to grab my scoring board here. I just have a little one. You can use a big one, it doesn't matter. And from 1, I'm going to do 4. I'm going to move this so I can actually see my measurements. So I'm going to score at 4. And then I'm going to turn it over and I'm going to score at 2. Okay. I'm going to fold it over. And here I didn't get I'm using a 120-pound card, but I'm going to just take my handy dandy little sanding paper and just sand off any rough edges from the fold. Okay. Now I'm going to do the same on this side, fold it over, and then crease my fold. And just sand off any of those little edges. Okay. Now again, it doesn't matter whichever way you prefer the fold to be, what's going to be on the one side and the other. Okay. You see, just folds like that. Okay. So now on my design, I actually have, I use the polka dot embossing folder again. So if you have a polka dot embossing folder, you can use that. If you chose another design to emboss today or chose not to emboss, that's up to you. But I'm going to now just emboss this smaller edge of a cardstock. So this just sits, and I only want a small piece. So it is a 5-inch card, so that works well. I'm just going to put the edge at the fold. Okay. And then I'm going to put it through. I have to just adjust my machine. And I'm going to add it to my machine similar to before. I'm just going to keep the edge at the edge. It doesn't matter because your line, if you have it right at the edge, the line, if you get a line, is going to be in the crease of the fold anyway. So I'm just going to run that through. And at the same time, you can always emboss the belly band. So maybe I'll go ahead and do that. So you can see I just have, it's going to be this way. So make sure that you've got, you're embossing the correct way. All right, so for the belly band, I'm just going to estimate where it is in half. Because again, this is a 5-inch embossing folder. I'm just gonna, I guess I have my measurements right here. It could be exact if I want. Ah, it looks pretty good. And so you might want to just make sure the pattern is the way you want it. So I'm just adjusting it so I have a pattern right along the top edge and then a pattern right along the bottom edge. That was why I had it just over 1 inch. And I'm going to run it through my embossing or through my machine like this, like this. Okay, so now I have my belly band embossed as well. So I can set that aside for a little bit later when we're going to put that together. So now what we're going to do is cut the pattern paper. So if you see the pattern paper, I tried to maximize my paper sheet. So the front is, this was 4 inches. So I usually like a little bit, a 1/4 inch or 1/8 of an inch as a mat. So this is 3 3/4 wide by 4 3/4 long. So when you use this piece of paper, I would cut it at 3 3/4 so that you have this longer strip here, because we're going to use that for the inside panel, because we're going to use that for this piece. Okay. So, well, actually, you can cut it, doesn't really matter, because it's a square. So I'm going to cut it 4 3/4, or yeah, 4 3/4, because that was our size here. So you have to trust me, it's 4 3/4 here. And I'm just going to trim that. And then I'm going to cut it, turn it over, because now I have it the correct width. And I'm going to cut it at 3 3/4. And then I believe this is the right size for the inside. No, I have to trim it just a shade. Trim it. So this panel was 2 inches, if you recall, because we scored it at 2. So this should be 1 3/4. And I think that's when you get, so this leftover piece, trim it at 1 3/4. And this is where you get your little strip left over that I used for this part. So we're using up all of those pieces, and we have another little piece left over that we can use for this inner piece. Okay. So if you want to go ahead and cut this leftover piece, so you've got your front piece, you've got your inner piece, and you've got your little strip here that's going to go on the the overlapping piece on the front. You can put those aside. And then this leftover piece, we're going to cut this to 3 1/2 inches, because we have a little 3 3/4 inch strip here. And then we're just going to trim it. Now, you can make this as wide as you like. I have it at 3/4 of an inch. So it's 3 3/4 or 3 1/2 by 3/4 of an inch. Okay. So I have that little piece now for this inner part. I have a few little pieces left over, but otherwise you've used your whole sheet. I'm just going to put those aside, and you can decorate the inside if you like. All right, so now we can just add those pieces to the card. So I'm going to add all my paper pieces to the front using my double-sided tape. Looks like I'm running out of this 3mm size, but again, it's just paper, it's flat. You don't need too much adhesive to keep it in place. I try and put it as close to the edge as possible so that you don't have any curling. If it, okay. I like to actually put the double-sided tape on all my pieces so that I can just add them all to the card together. So I'm just going to go ahead and do the other pieces I have. And for this one, it's going on the inside, but I'm not even sure I'm going to add anything there. I might just do maybe the top. Sometimes if it's a small strip, I don't bother. All right. And this strip, so this is going to be adhered to the embossing part. So I want a little bit thicker paper. And so I'm going to use my 5 millimeter, at least on one side. You can't, unfortunately, you can't really put it just down the center because you want it to be, you don't really want it coming off. And we're going to add the little fronds to that side. So just going to use a combination. So we're going to use 5 millimeter and 3 millimeter. And we'll then be able to adhere that. This one is for the inside piece. Oh, well, I don't gonna have a lot of options because I just ran out of my 3 millimeter tape. So I'm just gonna use a small piece of 3 and 1 piece of 5. All right. Okay, so now we can start adding it to our design. And I'm going to do the front piece first. I want it to get it centered. So again, I'm doing my little trick that I leave half the piece. And I kind of fold it back so that the remnants stay out. And this will allow me to make sure if there's a pattern to the paper, it's not upside down. I think it doesn't really matter, this piece. And I'm just going to adhere that. All right. Press it down. And then I'm going to add this little piece. And a little trick here is because you remember it's the same width as this one. And you kind of want it so that it actually, if you fold it the other way, it actually lines up with the lines here. So I'm just going to add it with it folded over the opposite way. Just helps you line things up. Okay. And I'm just going to adhere it just a little bit in from the edge. So there's a little bit of a border, and I'm just going to rub that down. Okay, so now it's exactly the same. Again, it's going over that embossed area, so that's why I add a little thicker piece of tape so it would adhere better. All right, and now we're moving on to the inside edge here, and you can see this is going to adhere nicely to just coordinate the inside edge and inside and outside of the card. Again, you could choose perhaps to use an opposite, the other side of the paper if you wanted to coordinate. It doesn't really matter. I just put it all to coordinate. So, or you could choose maybe to add a solid color. All right. Okay, so we have our gatefold there. And now we can add the fronds. And so I'm not sure if everyone's had a chance to cut these yet. I had mine cut. So what I chose to do was add this largest frond piece to the front of the card. And there's kind of a straight section here in the center. And so what I did was I lined that up with the edge of the paper. So you can see we have a little bit of a frame around our pattern paper. So I'm just going to line it up so it fits right over the pattern paper, basically. So there's a little piece of white. It's hard to see, but I'm going to just put my hand here. So kind of like that. And then that allows, in the center, so that the little fronds are free. So I'm just going to glue the center piece, and then leave the fronds overlapping, or the little curly cues. They're not attached. Well, maybe you want to attach the bottom one, but obviously the top one's just free. Okay, I think I open and close this a lot of times, so I think having this closed is helpful. If you're sending it to one person, it probably doesn't really matter. Now you could choose, now my glue has just clogged a little bit, so I'm going to use my sticky sticks. And when I'm going to do this, I can add the bottom. I'm just going to put it on the edge because I don't want it to overlap. And that way the bottom one is attached, will be attached, and the top one's free. So you can see I just did that on the edge of the sticky sticks. I always find when I'm using my sticky sticks, my edges are where I have most adhesive. So when I almost used up a piece of sticky sticks, I can add small little sentiments by just attaching the sentiment around the edge. Okay, so I'm just going to place that there. And I have my one frond attached. And then I'm going to do the same for the inside pieces. You can see here, I chose to put the wider one at the top, but again, it really doesn't matter. You could have two of the same. I chose to have one of each of them. And just so that the little curls are just off, or just overlapping a little bit. And again, kind of right up to the edge. So that's a way to do it, just the little curl, a little bit over. And again, having them attached to the bottom is helpful. I mean, this card was opened and closed many, many times. So I'm just going to do it this way so that the little curl is going to be off of my sticky sticks and the rest of it can stay attached. And I'm just trying to get the curl kind of at the top of the pattern paper. Right. And then I'm going to add this one, and they just fit, like, was fortuitous. It wasn't planned. And again, I'm going to just add this to the edge. All right. Right up to the edge. Place it down. And we're good to go. All right. So again, you can fold it either way, whatever you prefer. So now what we can do is just add, now I'm not sure people had a chance to cut this little piece. I don't want it quite so long. So this is just a strip. So a little piece of scrap. I wanted it 3 3/4. It looks like I have this too long. I'm just going to use a pair of scissors and trim it a little bit. So this piece is a little bit long too. And I didn't have a little border. I need to trim this a little bit or make this wider. Yeah. All right, I'm just gonna add this. I'm gonna trim it a little bit more. That'll work. So again, this is just the pattern piece of paper onto the, just a little strip of cardstock to serve as that card holder. Mine's not framed, but really doesn't matter. And then how we're just going to add this with double-sided tape to one edge. I'm going to use the 5mm tape, which is the only one I have left, but I would have used it anyway. And that's because I wanted to be adhered well. And that's all we're going to do to adhere it. There's enough give at the top that it will allow you to place a card in there. So I'm just going to attach that. It's fairly close to the bottom, so we have some space to add whatever we might want. And you can see I'm just going to rub it down a little bit. And get my gift card. And as you can just lift it up and it's going to be fine, right? So there's no fancy way to make that. And then even if you go outside, so say your stamped card was going to be a little bit larger, it doesn't matter because it's not restrictive on the edges. And yet it's going to hold perfectly well and keep that in place without having it shift or anything. So a simple way to add a little card holder for a gift card if you're making cards for Christmas or birthdays or whatever. All right, so the other thing that I did do for the inside of this card was added one more of the little fronds. You can see here, again, having one of the curls just above the paper. So we can add that with sticky specs as well. So on an edge. And I just ran it along the upper edge. And there you go. So just a decoration for that card holder. So the next thing that we are going to do is let's add the little hearts or the larger hearts, whatever you prefer. Now you could have embossed this little heart with polka dots if you wanted. It doesn't really matter. It's pretty small, so you're not going to see too much, but I'm just going to add it to my card with a few little foam tabs. And I'm going to choose the same location as I had in the example. So just sort of upper left corner, and I'm just eyeballing it here, but about there. And then you're going to add the smaller heart again on top. And then we're going to add a pearl. Now, if you're choosing to stamp the actual inside of the card, we're not going to do that one today. You should have stamped it before you add any dimension here. So if you are choosing to do that, you can probably still peel off this now to allow you to be able to have a flat surface to stamp on. But as I said today, we're just going to stamp the card, but that would just be one little thing you need to remember if you wanted to stamp the inside. So now I'm going to add a few little of the pearls. Again, my glue needs to be opened. Let's see. I'm just going to adhere that with the, again, I'm not sure where my, sometimes if I leave it on the side, it runs in. I like it standing up, and then it tends not to clog. But I'm just going to use the adhesive on the pearls today. But again, if you have the glue handy, then I would use a little bit of glue, and I can go back and add the glue if I want to. Okay. And then I'm going to do one just on top of the pattern paper, so above the heart, and another one similar distance below the heart. And that's a decoration for the front of the card. And now all we have left to do is stamp the rose and stamp the belly band. So I'm going to get my stamp positioner out. I'm just cleaning up my table here a little bit. And the way we're going to do the belly band is, I'm going to show you that now, is you're going to line it up so that you have your embossed design so it fits the full size of the paper, the front card. And then you're going to lift it up and you're just going to hold it and just gently fold it around the card. Sorry, kind of off camera there. And so I did that for this side. So I'm holding it in place so the pattern, and then I'm going to do exactly the same to the other side. Now, this belly band is going to overlap because we made it 11 inches, so you can see it there. And then you can just attach those pieces together, okay? And that creates your belly band. I'm not going to attach it yet, and it needs to be just have enough flexibility, which it should when you adhere it together, to go over the pearls, right? Because it needs to just lift a little bit over the pearls. So don't make it so tight when you adhere it, but have a little bit of give that it can go over those pearls, okay? And what we're going to do now is, I'm not adhering it yet. I'm just going to, we're going to stamp the belly band, and then we're going to stamp the card for the inside of the design. I think I have my card on the inside here. Yeah, all right. Okay. So I have a stamp positioner that I'm going to use today. It's a Couture Creations positioner. You can see it's well loved. It's a little bit dirty right now. And I have a kind of a sticky mat on the inside, but I do like a grid on the inside. So there are some papers that you can put on the inside. This is a sticky mat that you can use for a Cricut or something. And what I'm going to do is just put my paper alongside one of the lines. And I'm just going to use my little magnets to hold it in place. There's not a lot of stickiness left, but it does have a little bit of a grip. And now what you need to do is grab your stamp set, and you'll notice on the stamp set that there's a lot of the floral design, but there's also several sentiments. So I thought we would choose the sentiments that go along with a wedding invitation. So we have save the date, and I decided to put that, I think I'm gonna have to move this in the middle, sort of at the one edge. And so part of planning for my belly band was also to make sure that it was wide enough to accommodate all of the stamps I wanted to use. And then in the middle, I'm gonna have, you have my whole heart. Put that. And then we're going to add worth the wait. There is a love as well, so you could choose to use the love instead of one of these. Yeah, I think I gotta put it right at the edge. Okay. So you can play with it a little bit. And then make sure they're straight. We kind of centered it lengthwise for each of them. So you can see that it's not exactly, but they're all sort of centered in their own space. All right, so I'm pretty happy with that. I'm gonna add my other magnet just to the edge. And then I'm gonna close my lid, pick up my stamp, and then we should be good to go. So for this design, I'm gonna use some Distress Oxide. It sort of lends itself, but whatever green you might have. And I'm going to choose to actually emboss this with clear embossing powder, which, oh, there we go. So I'm gonna just lightly stamp. Yeah. I often like to just do 2 stamps. It tends to, because I don't like to squish the stamp. There we go. So that looks good. And now I'm just going to take this off. Move this over for a second. So I have a piece of paper, just copy paper, to catch my clear embossing. This is my detailed clear embossing. I'm just going to sprinkle it over. Put this all back. And then I do have a heat tool, so you're going to hear me using my heat tool here a minute. Often, again, I like to hold my paper in with my tweezers. I like to emboss from the back and then watch it start to, so it's curling up here a little bit, but I just find I get a better result. Sometimes I will go from the front, but I do prefer going from the back. So I'm just going to hold it here. All right. So now we have our stamped and embossed belly band that we can add, just let that dry a little bit, and we can add to the front of the belly band. And I'm just going to use my, yeah, it's good, my 5mm tape. Oh, there we go. And again, I'm going to do 2 strips along each edge, and that's because we're adhering it over polka dot. Sometimes I use a combination of tape and glue. Sometimes on little edges, if I wanted to just make sure it's stuck, or it's a curved edge and it's hard to get tape, I might add a little bit of glue. Combination. So I'm just going to add this, sort of center it here between my polka dots, so it's kind of helpful that I have that pattern, and just press it down. So there we have our belly band. And you can adhere it after. I'm just going to put this aside because the last thing we have to do is stamp our rose or whatever floral design you're going to go with today. I think I'm going to choose the rose like I did in my sample, but you could also choose, I thought this was rose when I was making it, but it's actually a different flower. I'm not sure which flower that is. I think there is a stamp that coordinates with it. I think it's more of this center one. So you could choose to do that one if you wanted. I'm going to choose to do the rose today. So I'm just going to peel off my stamp. I'm going to clean my little stamps. So actually, when you're doing a bunch of stamping, this Nelly stamp chamois is great for cleaning your stamp. I'm just going, so it's wet. I keep it in a Ziploc bag to keep it wet, because after I wet it, and then if it dries out, it's hard. So, but it stays nice and moist, and all you have to do is just wipe it off. It does a great job cleaning your stamp. And with Nelly's newest, so you can see the ink is on my chamois here. The Nelly has these new stamping dies, which are great. We'll definitely have to have a little demo of those in another day. I think we're closing in on the end of our class. I'm just going to take these back, but you can see the stamps are nice and clean, and it was very simple. I see I didn't get the little edge, but so it's great. And it's great to have, so you don't constantly have to go to the sink if you don't have a sink close to your crafting area to wash your stamps. And it's reusable. So You know, it's not like the baby wipes that you throw away all of the, just rinse it out and you're good to go for a while again. I'm just gonna replace my stamp. All right. So now I have my card and I'm gonna put it in my stamping tool here. I'm gonna put one on either end here. Got my rose. So place it where I kind of centered it. If you wanted to decorate the bottom with another piece of the pattern paper, you could do that. So you could place it more up towards the front or the top, I mean, it's up to you. But I'm going to center it. I'm going to pick up my stamp. Sorry, well, tick on my throat. And so ink spheres. It's really your choice. In my example, I actually colored it in with some colored pencils. It's hard to see the rose. I used a little bit of a cream color. I used some grayish ink for the roses, and I used some green ink just to stamp the leaves. You could stamp it in black and then color it in. You could stamp it like I did. You could color it in with alcohol markers, whatever you like to color with. I don't have alcohol markers. I need to get some, but I did have some colored pencils. And I just added a little bit of color to the leaves and a little bit of color and shaded a little bit of gray in the flower. Sorry. I think I've been talking too much. I need a sip of water or something. All right. So for this one, I have a few colors of little teardrops. They make it easier if you're trying to do more than one color on your stamp. You could just do black, do it black. We're going to do one of those in our next class. But for this, I'm really sorry. I'm going to use a little bit of green. I don't think this is a green I used, but they'll do. And I'm just going to go over my leaves. And the nice thing about the stamp positioner is that you can go back and you can add more ink to your design or change it if you like. And then if I got some on the petals or the rose that I didn't want, I can just wipe it off with my chamois. So I'm just going to do that. Looks like I've got a little bit on there. And now I'm just going to use some silver. I want a very light gray. But again, whatever colors you have, whatever is going to work for you. I'm just going to add a little bit of green into these stems. But again, I can go back and do that. I can even add a little bit of green. I'm going to do it to the upper piece. There's a little bit of shadow here. To the bud at the top. So I kind of have it inked up. I'm ready to go. I'm going to stamp it down. Just press. Now these are pigment inks. So you can see so my image there, it's very light, the rose. So I'm going to go over that. I think I used smoky gray, and this is silver. I think I'm going to go over the leaves as well here. And there's lots of ways to add into your stamp, or you could mix and match colors as well. So you stamp one color and then add a little bit more color to, or different colors to different parts of the leaves. So I'm going to just gently press this down again. Let's see where we're at. Yeah, so that's looking better here. And now I can just add some color. If you wanted, you could put some clear embossing powder over, or you can just color as is and let it dry. These are the dewdrops, and these are fast drying pigment ink. So So I'm not going to add any embossing powder to that, but I could if I wanted, whatever, again, you prefer when you add your color. So now I'm gonna, oops, I took it off. Well, I'm not going to re-stamp it. So I'm just gonna clean off my stamp again with my chamois. And, but you know, if you are making wedding invitations or invitations for another event and you're using this design, then it's great because you can just keep stamping. You can stamp all of them all together, which is so great from these stamp positioners. This one, I don't know if it's been demoed before. There's another one that where the lid comes off and then there's magnets that attach. But this one, basically, when you fold it down, it has two little feet here, so it's not against your paper. There's a space, and then you press it down. So you can see it kind of goes up and down, and I really like that. So the hunky dory, so this is Couture Creations. The hunky dory is exactly the same size and everything. It just has, instead of the flip component here, it has magnets here. So it readily adheres back into the magnet, so you could take this whole thing off, and then does the same thing. Then once it's on the magnets, it presses down and you can stamp. So anyway, that's the stamping tool, which is great. And now we have our stamp design. I think it's better light here. And I have some colored pencils, but again, you have alcohol markers, however you want to color your design. I'm going to choose this as kind of a similar green, and I'm going to just add probably a little bit of gray, and then I have just a very light bit of yellow, yellowy color, orangey, more skin tone color, just to create a little bit of shadow. So I'm going to, maybe we'll start with the leaves. But again, I'm just going to add a little bit into the leaves here. I'm not going to completely color them in. The ink itself has some graduation to it. You probably notice that if you've been stamping along. And so you're gonna, it already has some shadows sort of built in. I'm just going to fill in a little bit, leaving areas that might be highlighted with light without coloring them. I'm not a great person to color. But I'm just going to highlight a little bit here. And because I don't really have a lot of different colors of green to add shadow, you can just go over and make it a little bit darker if to add that shadow. Or I have a few other green colors, but I'm not going to do that today. But you can take as long as you like to color your stamp designs. And that's why I kind of left it to the end. So people could take their time and just color, because the rest of the cards already been put together. I'm going to add just a little bit of gray in the creases or where there's again, the stamps already have some of the areas for shading with little lines in them anyway. And then maybe just a little bit there. Maybe a little bit on the underside. And then I'm just going to add a little bit of the color. And the pattern paper really had mainly white roses and flowers. So, but there's nothing stopping you from making it a red rose. It just doesn't really fit with the pattern of the paper, but you might have other pattern papers that would go along with a red rose. especially if you're thinking maybe Mother's Day or another event. Valentine's was just this week, and when I went to the grocery store, everybody was buying roses. The men were buying roses. So people may have flowers in their homes. All right. Again, you're going to be able to do the detail of this coloring at your leisure. I just wanted to add a little bit to the card. It's hard to see. For some reason, my light is now more shadowy. There you go. That's probably better. And again, so you could have added this to the inside of the card like I did here. I used a little bit different colors there. Or like I added it to the card today that could then go on the inside of my card. There. So you can, and then the belly band, you can just add a little piece of tape again. Make sure that it's able to fold over those pearls. So I'm going to leave it just, I'm just going to add a little bit of double-sided tape and just leave a little bit of give. I'm just going to actually let my card open up a little bit there. Okay, so that works. So it's just going to go over my pearls. Make sure it doesn't get that little bond. So we're good. All right. So that's the end of today's class. So I'm hoping everybody had were able to produce something similar, and we're happy with the design and the instructions. If you have any feedback, let me know, because in 2 weeks, we're going to have another class. We're going to try, I'm just going to find my designs here for you to see if you haven't seen them online. So it's using the same product. When I joined the last class that Anita did a couple of weeks ago, people were requesting Sympathy Cards. So I thought, well, although this pattern pack has sort of a love and wedding theme, you can use the pattern paper for other occasions. So I made a few sympathy cards, or ones that would, or designs that would be okay for sympathy, right? That you could use them for sympathy, or you could use them for any other occasion. So I thought this pattern, I think it's camellias, but lent itself towards brown paper. So we're going to make this card with a 5-flower petal design. So this one, unfortunately, is no longer in stock. It's Sue Wilson's camellia petal, full petal flower. So if you've been crafting for a while, you may have that. Otherwise, just choose a 5-petal flower. I only chose 5-petal because that kind of matches the pattern paper. But you could choose your favorite flower. It really doesn't matter, or choose a different color paper. But this one kind of lent itself to brown. And then we just decorated the inside with the frond as well. So we're going to do that one. This is kind of our bonus card, so hopefully we'll have a chance to make it. It's very simple. I just stamped in black ink, and then we added it to pattern paper and just added a little bit of interest with gray and black here. So it's not exactly symmetrical. It is symmetrical, but it's not like a matted square. I just made the dimensions a little bit different for the gray, and then we added a frond to the bottom and with a couple enamel dots. So we'll make that one. That's a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 or A2 size card. And then this one's going to take us a little bit longer. Again, it lends itself to sympathy. It kind of has a grayish tone. And we're going to create a little window, kind of like we did with the tool shaker. We didn't make this shaker. It uses an opposite, the opposite side of the paper. So you see the two designs, little strip. These are fronds. The hearts again. We're going to do a partial embossing. I don't think you can see it. So there's only a strip of embossing. So we're going to go through how to do that with embossing folders. So those are 3 designs for our next class in a couple weeks. And just before we let you go, I made this one similar as the one we're going to make. I used the rub-on transfer here for Thinking of You, but you could also use a stamp for that. So that's otherwise a similar design, a little bit different embossing folder there. And then this one I thought would be a great anniversary card, or it could be wedding card, right? And again, so we stamped the rose and I just embossed that one with gold, or I think it's called bright gold, detailed bright gold embossing powder. We used the gold or coppery colored enamel dots that you have with your design. We used the lace here. I used a love stamp and sort of matted it with a little tag. And then this is one of the Sue Wilson heart dies. I'll have it for you next class. I don't have it handy to give you the number. It's kind of 2 panels of hearts, and this happened to be a nice little strip in the middle. So it's very cute. I like the little hearts. And this is the pattern paper that kind of has more of a gold to it. And so I just matted it in a gold cardstock. So we're not making this one, but it's another example you can use. And again, you can use the same design with different colors for different occasions. So I think that's about it. Hopefully everybody had a good time, and I'll see you in a couple weeks. So have a good few weeks, everyone, and we'll see you in a couple weeks for our next class. Thanks for coming and joining in.